Drusana Levitsky-Gray is the fifth generation in her family to be born deaf. She's passionate about helping other deaf people, and the key to her communication is Australian Sign Language, or Auslan, with Auslan interpreter Marie Madden with us as well in the studio this morning. It's a very good morning to Drusana. Since becoming the Young Australian of the Year, you've been extremely busy and you have a pretty big crusade that you're undertaking this year.
Yes, exactly, definitely. This year is a wonderful opportunity to be able to promote Auslan, a beautiful sign language.
So let's tell people about what Auslan is and a lot of the misconceptions, because I've learnt a lot just from talking to you now. Not every single deaf child gets taught Auslan from when they're very young, do they? Which I found staggering.
That's right. Auslan, Australian Sign Language, is a real language with its own grammar, its own structure and syntax and so on. Yes, unfortunately, a lot of deaf children aren't given full access to Auslan as a human right. And often it's a second choice or a choice of last resort, if you like. People try technological devices, hearing aids and lip reading and oral language and so on. I'm living proof that you can have Auslan as a first language and become a confident, assertive, knowledgeable, intelligent person. And you reduce the risk of mental health issues if you give access to Auslan. You improve self-esteem. We need to think a lot about the well-being of our deaf children in Australia. They have a right to have a language, to fully express themselves and to fully communicate. As I keep saying, research says that when you've got one language, you can learn other languages. So why wouldn't we give them that opportunity to have equality as far as language is concerned?
You're actually pushing to have it integrated into schools as a language other than English, isn't that right?
Correct, absolutely. It's already been happening. For example, in Western Australia for over a year now, it's taught in 3 different schools. In other states, they do have some education classes for Auslan as a LOT, but I'd like to see that standardised and have a curriculum to focus on it as a language other than English. So you can earn a certificate through TAFE, and people then can become Auslan interpreters. They could become professionally qualified interpreters then in the future.
Would you ever use technology to enhance your hearing, or is that even an option for you? Or would you feel like that's actually not necessary because you're so comfortable with your deafness and you can express yourself through Auslan?
Yeah. I was actually born hard of hearing. We use the term hard of hearing. So with hearing aids, I can hear it quite well and speak quite well because I was only moderately hearing impaired. So when I grew up, I looked into my identity and who I was, and I found a leadership program in Europe for a year. It was for deaf youth, and I was thinking a lot about who am I? What's my community? What's my culture? What's my language? And after about 15 years of having hearing aids, I decided not to use them anymore because they were not part of my identity. I love Auslan, I love the deaf community, and I love the rest of Australia too. But for me, to use hearing aids means it's easier for other people, people who can hear, to communicate with me. We need to work together. It's not up to me to make your life easier. So it's an opportunity for me to encourage people to learn Auslan, to communicate with me. And I feel that when I'm signing with people, they respect me much more. They realise that it's a real language, it's a beautiful language. So that's my dream for the future, for people to learn Auslan and to communicate with me.
So you choose not to have a technology that I suppose that would make you sort of halfway able to hear, but rather just go the whole hog and just, you know, change the mindset instead of changing the ears, if you like.
Yeah, exactly. Many deaf people love having hearing aids and they use them a lot. And I encourage them to do that if it works for them. If they feel confident, then it's perfectly okay for them. But for me, I've experienced both worlds. For me, they're both wonderful, but I like using Auslan. It's my community, it's my language. I want to use it 24/7, and I want to see Australian appreciating and recognising how amazing our language really is.
Drusana, one thing you said to us is that you feel whole already and you don't feel like you have a disability.
Absolutely not. I never was. I've always been Drusana. I'm just who I am.
Well, you are such an inspirational young woman and Young Australian of the Year. We wish you all of the best. You're certainly a friend of Studio 10. Good luck.
Good luck.
Yeah, thank you.